Hello, my name is Morris. You might have noticed that I'm a talking frog. A talking stuffed frog. A talking stuffed frog that sometimes talks about games. A stuffed frog talking about games with a voice that sounds like a crap impersonation of a famous British actor. It's probably best not to think about these things too much. Maybe this is a social experiment to see if you lot really will watch anything on the bleeding YouTube. In this video, we're looking at a peculiar little title from the original PlayStation era. This was simply called Kurushi in most of the world, with the US being an exception, where it was called Intelligent Cube, spelled with a Q, which can't really even be pronounced proper, and will leave you looking like a right Burke if you asked for it in a shop. Don't know whether the different name was because it'd be more palatable to a US market. Maybe they felt that Americans just wouldn't go for a game with a Japanese-sounding name.
No wonder this circuit failed. It says made in Japan.
What do you mean, Doc? All the best stuff is made in Japan.
Of course, it was also Intelligent Cube in Japan. Well, Intelligento Cubu, which, to be fair, already sounds Japanese, and if you're going to go for a Japanese-sounding name, Kurushi sounds a bit catchier. Who knows why they make these decisions? It's the type of game you get for Christmas off your nan, because grandparents know naff all about games. Imagine the disappointment on the little tyke's face as he tears open the wrapping paper and discovers they've got a bleeding puzzle game. You wanted to shoot zombies in the brain, didn't you? Not this Christmas, son. It's like a kid in the early 1900s wanting Journey to the centre of the earth and getting a bumper book of Sudoku instead, which I'm not sure even existed in the 1900s. Someone will have to let me know in the comments. Despite all that, I remember the sampler disc that came with new PlayStations at the time had a demo of this very game included. I was just a tadpole at the time, but it was actually not all that awful, which wouldn't be an half-bad subtitle if you ask me. The game itself involves solving a continuing puzzle by eliminating and navigating rows of advancing cubes. The player starts out on a platform with cubes rolling from the top end towards the player at the bottom. The objective is to eliminate cubes and stop them rolling off the end. To do this, you mark a square for capture, then initiate the capture by pressing a button as the cube lands on it. If the player is unable to capture enough cubes, and the number of cubes that fall off the end is equal to or greater than the value of cubes contained in a row, the last row of blocks collapses, with more rows collapsing if the number of cubes missed exceeds the value of another row, in addition to the first one. If the player's on one of these blocks when they collapse, it's game over. If that sounds more complicated, frustrating and downright depressing than a day out at the DVLA, it's a blessing that the full version of the game includes some helpfully narrated instructions which make understanding how to play much easier.
The concept of the game is to try to capture the cubes. The player can mark a spot on the stage by pressing the X button. The game is played by marking a spot and then successfully deactivating the spot.
As with a lot of entries in the puzzle genre, the gameplay is more addictive than a crack-flavoured Big Mac, and difficulty progresses and eases you more into complicated aspects of the game. For example, it's not just as simple as capturing cubes. You eventually end up encountering forbidden cubes. These you're not allowed to capture. You should let them ones roll safely off the edge. If you do accidentally capture them, it'll result in you losing more blocks off the end of the platform, giving you even less space to work with in subsequent rounds. It might sound easy, but sometimes these forbidden cubes get in the way of blocks that you do want to capture. So you'll have to let them roll safely over to get to the ones behind them. Another complication comes in the form of advantage cubes, green in colour, like a frog. They leave the mark on a platform where they will capture and act like a little landmine that can be detonated later. These will initiate capturing the square where they were left, and also one block in every direction surrounding it. This can be delayed and used when it has the highest impact. Of course, you should avoid using it near forbidden cubes, which gets a bit tricky, but you can mark a square without capturing it to effectively protect a forbidden cube from the effect of an advantage cube. This honestly gets extremely tricky for the simple reason that you get to a point where you lose the ability to make rational, well thought out decisions, like having one too many at the office Christmas party. Puzzles aside, however, the most striking thing about this game is that it's conceptually really weird and a bit sinister. This game probably gave kids nightmares for years. There's something quite eerie about its setup, and it isn't 100% abstract like most puzzle games. The player is literally a person that finds themselves inexplicably inside a formless, featureless void, except for the platform that they're placed on. which features a legion of advancing, unrelenting, unflinching blocks that constantly threaten to roll over you, and if you find yourself at the edge of the platform, the rows collapse, casting you screaming into a black pit of nothingness. It's a sound you'll hear often.
Again.
Just what malevolent force has plucked you from everyday life to compete for their sick entertainment? Who the bleeding hell knows? There's an air of existential dread to Kurushi, which, if my Japanese is on point, means to be turned into human jam by being crushed to death by a symmetrical three-dimensional shape. No, wait, I think that's wrong. Looking it up, it actually means painful suffering. Not too far from what I said then. The game's sort of like if Jigsaw reimagined the Rubik's Cube. It's Tetris for sadomasochists.
Hello, Michael. I want to play a game.
It all reminds me a bit like the game Degeneration, published by Mindscape in 1992. Whilst that game was more obviously an action-adventure, it did feature some puzzle aspects and strange but deadly abstract enemies like those big white balloons on the TV series The Prisoner. The music of Kurushi is another thing that stands out. Not too common at the time to use something a bit more orchestral, which lends it an air of sophistication, though it does get a bit repetitive. There's a point where you'll be driven almost bonkers by it and end up grinning menacingly like Gary Barlow at a vineyard.
This is my idea of a very nice day out.
Yeah, it's a bit overcast, but thanks for taking me out.
Don't ever leave me, will you, Morris?
The mind behind Kurushi belongs to one Masahiko Sato, which does actually sound like it could be an anagram of sadomasochist. Sato-san was professor at Tokyo University of the Arts, and during an interview featured in PlayStation magazine, is said to have come up with the idea for a game on a particular Sunday afternoon in the mid-90s, like Doc Brown in Back to the Future, when he came up with the idea for the flux capacitor when hanging a picture while stood on a toilet. God only knows what Sato-san was doing when he came up with this. Probably pulling the wings off moths. Sato-san hoped that the game would be remembered for years to come, sort of like how classic card games are remembered. Bit of a lofty ambition to say the least, but I think the fact that Kurushi was included as one of the preloaded titles on 2018's miniature PlayStation Classic is testament to this lasting appeal, albeit more of a cult classic. Next year, Kurushi turns 28, which in turn makes me the oldest living frog in existence. But honestly, dusting this one off and giving it another play with felt good. I'm talking about the game, you dirty bastards. Sure, some games from that era might have been more highly regarded, but have aged worse than gender-specific bathrooms. On the other hand, Kurushi could have easily been released yesterday. Fair enough, people wouldn't buy it for around the 30 quid it was likely to have cost in 1997, but it might not be out of place as an indie game on console stores. Might even have been a mobile game, though I imagine advertisements and microtransactions might make it a bit crap. The final and most curious part of Kurushi is quite possibly the game's ending, which almost confirms that there was something amiss all along, despite the lack of an overt plot. Seeing the ending, it was at this moment I realised that despite the overall oppressive vibe the game gives off, there's something quite playful about it, and also quintessentially Japanese. I'm reminded of Japanese game shows where contestants are put through some unpleasant and punishing situations. This infusion of culture is something that seems distinctly missing from a lot of modern PlayStation titles, which opt for AAA budgets and blockbuster storylines. I'll let you enjoy this bizarre moment in silence to end this review. It proves to me that some things should just be accepted at face value, just like a talking frog puppet reviewing games.
Something has been observing our Earth, watching our behavior, our every move. But we have proven we have the technology to confront them face to face in a simulation of their choosing. Our task was neither to expose or destroy them, merely to match our intelligence with theirs. This we have achieved.